Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the Martin H. Harris Chapter President, Todd Freese.
Good morning and thank you. The Martin H. Harris Chapter is AFA's local chapter here in Central Florida. 35 years ago, we established this great symposium along with our folks at headquarters, AFA, and have been working closely with AFA to keep it as one of the premier professional development events for our airmen. Today, it is our honor to participate in continuing that great tradition by hosting this next session. I am pleased to announce our speaker, who will discuss innovative leadership in space operations. He is the commander of Air Force Space Command. As commander, he is responsible for organizing, training, equipping, and maintaining mission-ready space forces and capabilities for the North American Aerospace Defense Command, U.S. Strategic Command, and all other combatant commands around the world. Please help me in welcoming General John Raymond.
Thank you. Thanks, Todd. Good morning. How's everybody? Got it. First of all, Todd, thank you. Todd and I had the privilege of being stationed together at Yokota back in 2011 with the great earthquake, nuclear reactor disaster, and tsunami, and he did an absolutely spectacular job leading Yokota Air Base through that low-level radiation environment. So thanks for your leadership, continued leadership. Also want to thank AFA. Thanks for the privilege of being here and being able to talk a little about something that I'm really passionate about. This is an extremely exciting time to be in the space business. That's an understatement. About 3 weeks ago, I was at home and my daughter, Christina, who lives up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, sent me a text and said, "Dad, you're going viral." I said, "What do you mean I'm going viral?" "They're doing a Netflix show about space." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, you gotta be kidding me." So I got on, sure enough, there is. And she calls it back and said, "Hey, Dad, if they ever did a show about Air Force Space Command, who do you think would play you?" And I came up with all these, folks that I would like to have play me. And then she humbled me and sent me this is going around, this is going viral in the family now. This is I don't know how to do this. That's who's playing me. I'm pulling for Bruce Willis. But it's not just an exciting time, it's an absolutely critical time to be in the space business. We're at this strategic inflection point where we are reliant across the joint force on space capabilities. There's nothing we do as a joint force, nothing, zero, that is enabled by space. But yet, we can't assume that we're always going to have space superiority. That's what's changed. It's also changed. Look at the national security strategy. Look what it says. It says, assured access to space and freedom to maneuver in space is a vital national interest. Last national security strategy didn't say that. You have the President of the United States saying space is a warfighting domain just like air, land, and sea. The national security strategy goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, if anybody messes with that vital national interest, we're going to respond at a place, time, domain, and manner of our choosing. Look at the National Defense Strategy. It talks about global competition, multi-domain, multifunctional. That's what we do. So, some people tell me when they look in the future, say, "Man, the task is just daunting. The challenges that are ahead are so great." I completely disagree, and I'll steal a line from our chief. Our chief says, "Hey, every challenge there's an opportunity." As I look forward, there's nothing but opportunities. Absolutely nothing but opportunities. And those opportunities, the reason I can say that, and the foundation of that assertion, is the innovative nature of all four segments of the space domain today, and the innovative nature of our airmen that operate in this domain. It's part of our DNA. It is embedded in the space DNA. Let me introduce you to one of these airmen.
Hi, I'm Colonel Nick Hay, Air Force officer and NASA astronaut. I'm currently in Star City, Russia, making final preparations to launch to the International Space Station in the coming weeks. During my 7-month mission, I will live and work in the ultimate high ground, conducting experiments to advance what we know about how the human body responds in space so we can safely explore the Moon, Mars, and more in the coming decades. The Air Force has been at the forefront of space exploration since 1954, building some of the first rockets that took Americans into space, supporting the nation's launch and range infrastructure, providing search and rescue for human spaceflight, and tracking thousands of objects in Earth orbit to keep astronauts safe. It is my honor to be part of that tradition, and I want to thank all of my fellow airmen and our partners in the aerospace industry for what you do to continue to advance exploration in space.
Nick, you may have remembered back on 11 October of this past year, launched. In fact, the chief, the secretary, and I at Corona had an opportunity to do a conference call with him out in Colorado Springs. He was in Russia getting ready to launch, and we talked to him, wished him well, and then he took off, and shortly thereafter the rocket aborted, and he survived. And he's back on ground, and he's going back up again. It's a great Air Force family. His wife, Katie, is an ROTC, the lead of ROTC down at the University of Houston. And like he said, he's in Russia, getting ready to launch. Well, I'll tell you, what's exciting is this year, we're going to launch humans from the United States. And in fact, for those that are here, if you want to get up at about midnight and drive about an hour south, at about 2:20 this morning, the Sharks of the 45th Space Wing, where are you? Stand up. Thank you. The Sharks of the 45th Space Wing are going to support the launch of a SpaceX vehicle launching the Dragon crew capsule to the International Space Station. The last test, if you will, before we launch humans, currently scheduled this summer. So again, in all segments, whether it's the civil segment that we just talked about, whether it's the commercial segment that's so vibrant and alive and well, whether it's the national security segment, which is alive and well. And I'll also add another segment, and that would be the international partners that we're developing. There is a lot going on in the space business. Where did it all begin? So the very first RAND study, done back in 1946, talks about the preliminary design of an experimental world-circling spaceship. You know what that is? That's a satellite. That was the name for a satellite back then. And they posited in that report, in that study, that it was feasible to put a satellite in orbit, that it could, about 300 miles high, it could orbit around the Earth about every 90 minutes. You had to have a power plant that could put that into orbit going about 17,000 miles an hour. And they said you had to do that with a rocket. And they said you had to put that rocket probably down somewhere by the equator. Guess who chartered that study? Uh-oh. How do you go? Go back, please. There we go. Curtis LeMay. Probably not the person that you and I would have thought about, but our Air Force has had very, very visionary leaders in this business. And he was the one that started that report. So, unfortunately, the Soviet Union in October of 1957 beat us to the punch and got that world's first world-circling spaceship on orbit. In October of 1957, Sputnik was launched. That sent a significant shock wave, if you will, through the United States, and we needed to figure out a way to track it. We didn't have a way to track it. There was no such thing as the Space Situational Awareness Network at the time. We had this radar. It was a prototype for a ballistic missile early warning. And some smart engineers figured out a way to track Sputnik with that satellite, or with that dish. And the very next day, we as a nation had tracked Sputnik. Again, a national imperative, innovative thinking, taking existing technology and coming up with ConOps that are relevant to meet that challenge. What's interesting, though, and what I didn't realize until just recently, that Sputnik actually, and this began the foundation of the space situational awareness business that we do today. What I didn't realize was that Sputnik also had a pretty significant tie to this next program, GPS. There's a gentleman at Applied Physics Lab named Frank McClure. And so there's a group of people, when Sputnik was first launched, we're looking at how can we track this better. And they figured out if you knew exactly where you were on the ground and you could measure the Doppler wave shifts, you could then determine the position of a satellite. Well, again, Frank McClure, an innovative thinker, said, I wonder if we could do it the other way. I wonder if you didn't know where you were on the ground, but you knew where you were in space, could you determine where you were on the ground from space? Hence the GPS satellite. GPS satellite, and I'm going to talk to this first segment that I'm talking about is all about the period of time of where we built space. So everything from, I'll take that report, 1946, all the way up to about 1991. Just go with me and say that's the period of time where we built all of our space capabilities. And I'm going to use GPS as an example. But GPS, what we did was we had several different prototype systems. The Navy had a system called Transit. The Navy had a system called Timation. The Air Force had a prototype system as well. None of them could compete well enough to get funded. This was critical to the Cold War. So this is very similar to the conversation of the story that the Secretary told yesterday with the hypersonics. The Department of Defense said, okay, come together and figure it out. So in a meeting in 1973 in the Pentagon, services got together and they took the best of each program. They put it underneath a colonel, Colonel Bradford Parkinson, Air Force colonel, and said, you're going to run it. And last week, we celebrated the 41st anniversary of the GPS satellite. In fact, several months ago, back in October of this year, 45th Space Wing, go Sharks, supported the launch of the first ever GPS-3 satellite. Has 3 times better accuracy and 8 times more protection against jamming. But again, all of our satellite programs that we have to date were all largely started with prototypes, innovative, put in the hands of operators, developing innovative ConOps, meet a national imperative, and that's what we saw. Then that provided us great advantage. Integrating, or those space capabilities provided us great advantage. Desert Storm happened. 1991. For those that were alive or for those that have studied Desert Storm, what happened? The ground forces did what? A left hook. How do you do a left hook in the desert at night, without street signs telling you where to go? Do it with GPS. Although even at that time, we didn't even have a full constellation of GPS satellites up. We had these satellites up. Anybody non-space person know what a DSP satellite does? What's it used for? Strategic missile warning. What was the big issue in Desert Storm? Scud missiles. These satellites were designed to detect big intercontinental ballistic missiles. Scud missiles were smaller, shorter burning, shorter flight time. Innovative folks figured out that if you took that satellite and processed that data in stereo and optimized the communication links to bring that communication link direct to the warfighter, we could provide tactical warning. And so we got so good at it that our operators could detect tactical warning, turn on the TV, and hear the sirens going, and we could warn people to duck. Space-based visible sensor. This is a prototype for SSA. The satellite grayed out in the upper left is called MSX. It was an experimental satellite. There was a sensor on board. We were trying to figure out if you could do space situational awareness from space. There's a lot of naysayers. People thought that wasn't the right way to do this. Costs a lot of money. Wouldn't be effective. We put an optical sensor on that satellite, and after that satellite finished doing its experiments for a couple years, we started using the sensor. We put it in the hands of operators. There's a common theme here. We put that technology prototype in the hands of operators, and what we thought we were going to get 50 observations a day, we figured out, the operators figured out, that if you looked at 2 pinch points in space, you could track a lot more. We actually tracked about 350 objects a day. This became the foundation for what we have today in space. Space-based situational awareness, ORS-5, which does Operation Responsive Space 5, which does space situational awareness, and our GSAP, Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness Program. This became the foundation. But again, an innovative approach. There's a lot of naysayers. Every one of these programs, there's a lot of naysayers with GPS. GPS was going to cost $1 billion to get that up on orbit. Last example in this operationalizing. So we built space all the way up through 1991. Desert Storm happened. Now we're in this period of how do you take those capabilities that we built and how do you use them for the warfighter? We had built an Air Force weapons school down at the Warfare Center for space, a space division. We started training space operators to be weapons officers. We built an AOC. We built something called the Director of Space Forces. We built all this infrastructure, all this capability to be able to bring space to the fight. I was privileged to be deployed in 2006 as the Director of Space Forces. And at that time, the Air Force was about to drop the first ever small diameter bomb. And the small diameter bomb is small, hence the name, 250-pound bomb. It needed to be accurate. And there was a thought that we were going to do differential GPS to make sure that that small bomb had the best GPS that you could ever have. So it would hit precisely where we needed it to hit, have the effect it would have, and not cause collateral damage. We were going to do that. We were going to put towers all over the place. Well, back in 2006, you couldn't go put towers all over Iraq and Afghanistan. It was a war zone. So some innovative thinkers thought, hey, back at Schriever Air Force Base, where the control center is for GPS, coming off my computer, I have better accuracy than what's coming off the satellite, because it's what we call zero-age data. It's perfect. There's no latency in it. And if there's a way to get that data into that weapon hanging on the wing of an F-15E, it'll have the best GPS available. And so weapons officers, 3 in this picture, Colonel Endicott's in the middle, space weapons officer assigned. He's currently the wing commander, Brigadier General Select Wing Commander up at Buckley Air Force Base. Cheese Gerber, who's on the left, is another space weapons officer, and Ramsey Taberski, who's the weapons officer at the time from Lakenheath, got together and figured out if they could get that data in a Link 16 format, they could broadcast that throughout the theater over Link 16 straight to the weapon. And that's what happened. The first small diameter bomb dropped. In General North, the CFAC came to me and said, hey, where is this program called Talon Namath? And that's what we called it. I said, sir, it's still isn't ready yet. Well, we just dropped the first one. And so I said, he tasked me to brief him every week on the status of Talon Namath until I got in theater. I never had to give a briefing because innovative airmen that were trained in joint warfighting figured out how to do that. And they put a box out at the JSPOC, they put a box out at the JICO in the KAOC, and broadcast that over the Link 16 broadcast. And by the time the second small diameter bomb dropped, Talon Namath was up and running. That gave us great advantage, spectacular advantage. All that work that we've done since Desert Storm, which some had called the first space war, provided us an advantage that nobody else has. The challenge is our competitors or adversaries, Russia and China specifically, are developing capabilities to keep us from accessing space and to keep us from gaining that advantage that access provides. And so it is clear today that space is a warfighting domain just like air, land, and sea. And on this stage last year, right here, our chief stated, and I quote, "Now is the time for our service, regardless of specialty badges, to embrace space superiority with the same passion and sense of ownership that we've embraced air superiority." And we are. And what we're doing at Air Force Space Command now in this, so first was building space, second was operationalizing space. This third part I'll call space superiority. And what we're doing is reaching out to get innovative, game-changing capabilities into the hands of joint warfighters that are trained and steeped in both joint warfighting and space, and putting them in an environment where they can test, train, and fail. And I will tell you, this is a bad word to use in the space business, but there is an explosion of new capability coming. Look, last 2 days ago, I think it was 2 days ago, OneWeb, a company that's located just down the road here, just launched their first, I think it was 7 satellites of a new network that's going to have hundreds of small satellites. We track 23,000 objects today, a little over 23,000 objects. Of those 23,000 objects, only about 1,400 are satellites, a little over 1,400, approximately. OneWeb, SpaceX. SpaceX has a constellation they're building that's going to have 4,000 satellites. Just think what that can do for us if we put those capabilities into the hands of operators and figure out how to use those for our advantage. What I'd like to do is kind of close up with three things that we're working that I think are going to be game changers for us. The first is standards. Any operational commander that's going to operate in a domain has to have the ability to command and control their forces. And so we reached out to the Air Force RCO, and we asked them to build a prototype of a battle management command and control system called ESBMC2, and using open standards that they used when they built the CMCC for the air domain, OMS and UCI. And Dr. Roper and I signed a letter mandating that everything that's coming into space will be OMS UCI compliant. And that prototype work is going really, really well, and I appreciate those in the consortium that are helping pull that across the finish line. That's going to allow us some of the things that you heard Mark Cuban talk about yesterday and other speakers talk about, machine-to-machine dialogue. It's going to help us with speed. If you look at the space domain, speed and scale are something that we're going to have to address. Machine-to-machine, speed. It's going to allow companies to innovate to those standards. They're not going to have to worry about that. They're just going to have to build their payloads is what we want them to focus on and innovate to those standards. The other thing that we did then was, it's one of those things, I've stayed at a Holiday Inn Express before, and so I'm not an expert, but I've stayed there. I know data, and data management's important. So we hired the first ever Chief Data Officer for Air Force Space Command. We're building a data strategy. We're also lucky that the Chief and Secretary assigned Major General Kim Kreider as my IMA, and she was acting as the Chief Data Officer for the Air Force. Between those two, we are moving out. We've already got 3 use cases that we're developing or developed that's already providing us some capability. And if you look at what we just did, this Enterprise Space Battle Management Command and Control, you can think of the analogy as the iPhone app, and with apps. We said, let's figure out how quick we can get an app onto a phone. So we did a VQ prize. And we did that in concert with AFRL, and we just did our first one. We said we want to have an app that will give our operators on the floor the ability to display and have better situational awareness with data that's coming in. And we went out to non-traditional partners, universities, students. 26 entries came back in, and last week we gave dollar awards for 8. And our goal is to take those 8 and put them on the floor, whittle those down and put the best ones on the floor on the NSDC to provide us advantage. So we see great benefit in this. The other thing that we're working hard is innovative partnerships. We've built partnerships with the intelligence community. We're doing joint programs with the intelligence community that we haven't done before. We're doing programs with our allies. We're putting hosted payloads on our coalition partner satellites. In fact, this April at the National Space Symposium, Chief is going to host an Air Chiefs Conference on space. We've got air chiefs from around the world that are coming in. I will tell you, every one of those countries, our partners, want to partner with us and are doing great things in space. And we're also, as I talked about, partnering with commercial industry, not just the traditional commercial industry, but the broad look at commercial industry. And the last thing that I'll highlight, is we're developing space warfighters, and this is a 2-part problem. This is developing space operators that have a better understanding of joint warfighting. And this is also about, how many pilots do we have in this room? Raise your hand if you're a pilot. You better understand space. And you don't to the level that you need to. And you don't to the level that you need to for you to be a success, and you don't to the level of detail that we need for us to be successful in space. Space superiority is a joint warfighting problem that's going to take all of us from all domains working. And so we're working very hard to develop this. We've stood up GPS CDO environment trainers, so we can train on that. We just went down to NASA last year, or a handful of months ago. NASA developed what we call rendezvous proximity operations, getting close to things. That's what they had to do for the Apollo missions. They developed it. They have spectacular trainers. Well, we have a space situational awareness satellite called GSAP that can get up close to things and characterize things. So why are we trying to build trainers? Why don't we just buy NASA's? So we're doing that. We've developed a space flag, very analogous to red flag. We participate in red flag, but we didn't have an exercise to go deep and steep in what space warfighters need to have. So we built a space red flag. This April in Washington, D.C., it's going to be linked very closely with NRO. We're holding our 6th space flag. We went from crawl to run pretty quick. And the next one in August is going to be our first coalition space flag. We're seeing great opportunities with this. Let me introduce you to a lieutenant. This is First Lieutenant Carl Black. He's assigned to the 50th Space Wing out at Schriever Air Force Base. So every year we go to WebTAC at Nellis. And every year it's the CAF WebTAC. And this year, and I give General Holmes a lot of credit for this year at the CAF WebTAC, we brought in some multi-domain, because we do a WebTAC and other major commands do a WebTAC. We brought in folks from our WebTAC to brief at the CAF WebTAC. And this first lieutenant got up in front of an audience, maybe not quite this big, but pretty doggone close to this big, had the chief, had every MAGCOM commander in the Air Force there, had I don't know how many general officers, 120-something general officers, and this first lieutenant got up there and schooled the Air Force on the MOG that he led with like 53 different people, including fighter pilots, air battle managers, on what we're going to have to do to command and control a fight that extends to space. And I was like a proud dad. I was sitting right there, and the chief got up at the end of the conference, and he said, "Lieutenant Black, come on up." And so he gets up, and he walks up to the front of the stage, and the chief said, "You know, one of the things that I get to do as a chief, I have the prerogative to give call signs. And I don't know if you have a call sign." And he did. I can't remember what it was. It's irrelevant now because the chief said, "Hey, guess what? I'm just going to give you a new call sign. Now, you can keep the one you have, or you can have the one that the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force decided to give you." And so he's now called Boyd, John Boyd, because he's a visionary. And he's helping us lead the Air Force to where we need to go. And Chief, I really appreciate it. You've given an extra bounce in the step to all those in Air Force Space Command. We've got really great airmen. I'm privileged, absolutely privileged, to lead a group of folks that are committed to this domain, committed to making sure that the space capabilities that we rely on as a nation are always there, and the space capabilities that we rely on as a joint force are always there. This is a quote that came out of that RAND report. I'll tell you, when you put technology in the hands of operators and you innovate and you train, you don't know where it's going to go. But I guarantee you're going to get more out of it than what you thought. And that's what that's what we're all about as airmen. Let me just say to all the airmen that are here, thank you. For all of us old folks that sit up front, we leave here with an extra bounce in our step because we get to hang out with some really cool people. We get to I mean, none of us, I guarantee you, none of us stay in the Air Force to sit behind our desks and do the things that we get to do each and every day. What keeps us in the Air Force is getting to hang out with airmen and getting to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And this event is, and the one in Washington, are the events that do this the best. So again, thank you to AFA. Chief, thank you for the opportunity to be here and privileged to lead. And I've got a couple minutes if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Raymond. So the questions are coming in, and I'm going to start off with one that's kind of segue in that last question. So I think you've interested a lot of people in space operations, and there are cadets in this room from the University of Central Florida. Go Knights.
That's right.
There we go. Okay. So, what are the important skills? What should someone know who's considering the life of a space operator, enlisted or officer?
Yeah, so first, let me just say, all the cool kids are coming to space these days. Just kidding. I just had the privilege of speaking to the Air Force Academy, 4,000 cadets. And no kidding, I've had some Air Force Academy cadets send me emails saying, sir, I'm scheduled to be a whatever officer, and I don't want to do that. I want to come to space. Can you help me? Last year, we had 13 Air Force Academy cadets. This year, we have 31 coming. It's a really exciting time to be in our business. I will tell you, it's completely shifted. It's not just sitting at a computer operating in a benign domain. It used to be as long as you could launch a satellite, if that satellite survived launch and what we called infant mortality, if it didn't die in the first couple days while it was on orbit, you were good to go. Then you had to worry about things hitting each other. And as an Air Force, we act as the space traffic control for the world. And on average, a little trivia fact, about once every 3 days, a satellite maneuvers to keep from hitting another piece of debris. Anybody see the movie Gravity? The debris problem is real. That was a little exaggerated, but we do all that tracking. So that's what it used to be. That's not the space operations that you'll come into. You're going to come into space operations that are steeped with a warfighting mentality. You're going to come in to the space operations as a warfighter, as a recognized warfighter, and I couldn't be more excited. For those that are interested, we need you. And I'll be hanging out here for the rest of the day. I'll give you my card and send me an email. I'm on the Global, and I'll be happy to help.
All right. General Raymond, do you think a space war is in our future?
I don't like the term space war. There's no such thing as a space war. It's just war, right? And for some reason, two countries or two entities decide something is up in their national interest that they need to go to war over. And those countries could decide to fight that war on the ground, like we've done for histories, or on the maritime, or in the air, or in space, or in cyber. And so it's just a means of warfare. I will tell you, and I need to say this, although space is a warfighting domain just like air, land, and sea, we don't want this fight. This is not a fight that we want to fight. So how do we keep that from happening? We deter it. How do you deter it? You deter it by being ready to fight and win and gain space superiority if deterrence were to fail. And so the question is a good question, but I just look at it differently. Same thing with deterrence. People say, how do you do space deterrence? Well, it's just deterrence. You have to change the deterrence calculus of who you're dealing with. And that's not just nuclear deterrence, that's all the strategic capabilities brought together.
All right, General Raymond, you mentioned OneWeb as a large constellation, and these numbers of constellations with hundreds of satellites is growing, especially with the 4,000 satellites and other things that are already there. What sort of capabilities are coming along to monitor those satellites and to keep them from hitting each other?
It's a great question. We do that today. What's interesting on the OneWeb and other companies like that, like a SpaceX or like a Google, and there's others that are out there, it's not just the fact that they're building satellites, large numbers of satellites, they're doing it with a production line mentality. It's a different business model. So today, most of our satellites are built like the one-off wooden shoe that take years. These are production lines, so that's going to change the game. We have spectacular space situational awareness capabilities across the globe. We also have partnerships, international partnerships that are also helping us feed into that space situational awareness equation. We are about to activate the new space fence out in Kwajalein that's going to provide some situational awareness as well. And then one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with the Department of Commerce. There's a difference between space situational awareness and space traffic management. Space situational awareness is a military necessity to make sure you have the situational awareness you need or the domain awareness that you need to conduct operations. Space traffic management is, I'll use the analogy, the air traffic control function. Hey, Todd, you're about to hit me, move out of the way. And we're going to transition that to the Department of Commerce. And so we're going to transition the space traffic management Department of Commerce. We're going to focus our airmen, our warfighters on the space situation awareness we need as a joint warfight, as a joint force. And we've got spectacular capabilities, partnerships, and new capabilities coming.
Excellent. Okay, you have to answer. Clemson or Crimson?
So let me do my best, Mark Cuman. Are you going to ask a stupid question like that? Is there any Alabama fans out here? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Go Tigers. Harvard of the South. Yeah, it's pretty tough when one of your bosses, General Hayden, is a Harvard guy, but he roots for Alabama. So it's been a great year. It's just been a great year.
On a personal level, as an Air Force officer, a senior Air Force officer, what was the best day of your Air Force career, and what was the worst?
I can't say just there's one good day. There's a lot of good days. If you're in this Air Force and you're not having good days, then you should probably go somewhere else, because there's no more exciting time to be in our Air Force than right today. I think when I'm all said and done, there'll be a handful of things, more than a handful, but things that I'll look back on and say, it was really cool to have been there. One of those was having the privilege to serve with you in Japan. And, I remember sitting there, I had just gotten to Japan. The earthquake happened. I think the base shook for like 6 or 7 straight minutes. We went outside, the road was doing this. It stopped, we went back inside, it started shaking again, we went back outside. I said, I better go check on my family. I go run outside to my house, and my kids are all sitting in the front yard with eyeballs about this big. I went back to the office, and then all of a sudden, wide-body United Airlines and Delta Airlines landed at Yokota. I said, man, this is big, because Narita Airport had shut down. And then to see the response from airmen and from sailors and soldiers to provide support to a great ally was something that I'll never forget. And it's something that I brought back with me to space. Honestly, we didn't have the partnerships that we needed in space. We didn't have to. Space was a benign domain. As I said, as long as you could launch a satellite and it didn't die on launch, you were good. That's not the case today. And I remember when I came back into this job, I said, hey, I saw the value of partnerships in Japan. Why don't we have that here? And with the chief's help and the secretary's help, the secretary is really pushing this. We're expanding more courses to our allied partners. In fact, this August, Space 300 is going to be opened up. Our first Space 300 course we'll have with allies in it will take place. I talked about Red Flag, or Space Flag, having a coalition one this coming August. We are working really hard to develop those partnerships, and I will tell you the strides that we've made in that area over the last couple of years have been really, really, really significant. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I can't thank you enough for the privilege of being able to talk a little bit about a really passionate subject, and look forward to, if you have any other questions outside, look forward to chatting with you out in the hallways. Thanks very much. Todd, thank you.
Thank you very much, General Raymond. On behalf of the Air Force Association, I'd like to present with you Airman for Life coin.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Give us a few minutes while we reset the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll reconvene promptly at 9:20, so please be back in your seats at 9:20 sharp.